In this video, we are going to start exploring the Posthumous Memoirs of Brás Cubas, Chapter 1. The title of the chapter is The Demise of the Author. Demise is basically death. The little note I wrote is death or the end of something, especially when referring to a person's passing in formal or literary contexts. Example: the report of my demise was an exaggeration. Mm. Keep in mind that in the original, Machado de Assis used the word óbito, right? So the demise of the author. I debated for a time as to whether I ought to open these memoirs at the beginning or at the end. That is, if I would start out with my birth or with my death. Granting that the common practice may be to begin with one's birth, two considerations led me to adopt a different method. Be careful with this expression, granting. The note I wrote is used to introduce a concession or admission before presenting a contrasting point. So something like admitting, right? Or assuming, right? For example, granting that he was inexperienced, his courage is still shone through. Right? It's interesting. I know our purpose here is not to analyze the Portuguese, the original one, but the word used was suposto, and sometimes even Brazilians confuse the word suposto, right? Suposto, take a look at the note I made. Usado no sentido de admitindo que, considerando que, ou dado que. Né? Introduz uma hipótese ou condição aceita como verdadeira para efeito de raciocínio. Admitindo que seja, for example, right? So, posto que seja. And of course, here, granting. So, admitting that the most common practice is to start by the beginning, I decided to adopt a different method. And I have reasons for that. Basically, this is what Brás Cubas said. The first is that I'm not exactly an author recently deceased, but a deceased man recently an author. Here we have sort of a big problem. Right, look, in Portuguese, it was uh, autor defunto. Não sou um autor defunto, mas defunto autor, right? What is the problem? In Portuguese, we can use the adjective before the noun or after the noun. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference. Uma bela casa, uma casa bela, right? So if you are not Brazilian, so in Portuguese we can say a beautiful house, a house beautiful. Of course, in English this is impossible. I mean, there are very, very specific, very formal cases where we can say that, but they're not like real examples, real cases in English, right? Sometimes it doesn't make any difference. Sometimes it's pretty strange to use before. For example, uma prova difícil, uma difícil prova de matemáticas would be strange. Sometimes it changes the meaning. For example, homem bravo, bravo homem. Bravo homem sounds like a man full of courage, right? Homem bravo, it sounds like an angry man, right? Let me just check my microphone here. Okay, because there's some background sound here, and if I don't adjust my microphone, then you will be hearing people here at home. I hope you are not, but if you are, just ignore it. Well, The thing is, what is the difference between autor defunto and defunto autor? I thought a nice translation would be, of course, we would have to explain it, right? It would be not an author who is dead. So basically, Brás Cubas said, I am not an author who is a dead man, but I am a dead man who is an author. That's the point. All right. So, in other words, uh, well, an author who is now a dead man, there are lots of them, right? Machado de Assis is one of them. Dostoevsky is another one. Well, and I could go on and on and on. They are authors who died. But Brás Cuba is a dead man who is an author. So he is writing dead, right? I really don't know why the translator here chose this construction. I think it makes it much more complicated. And recently deceased, I don't know why recently, but that was the solution he found for the problem, right? So I am not exactly an author recently deceased. So a guy who was an author and then died, but I am a deceased man, a guy who died recently an author. Huh? Well, he even put a note describing another translator solution where the guy actually explains everything. I don't think I have the note here. Let me see. Yes, I do. I do. I think it will be fun for our purposes here. This is the second note of that chapter. Look, he wrote here that William Grossman translated this sentence as I am not no, I am a deceased writer, not in the sense of one who has written and is now deceased, but in the sense of one who has died and is now writing. So, see, uh, this other translator chose to solve the problem just explaining it, and I think it's pretty nice. But I confess I actually like my solution as well. Not an author who is a dead man, but a dead man who is an author. Of course, it wouldn't be very explicit if we put it this way, right? Maybe some people would wonder a little bit what it means. But remember, in Portuguese, people wonder as well. It's, by the way, if you're not Brazilian, it's not every native that would recognize the difference between autor defunto and defunto autor. You know, even a Brazilian would have to stop a little bit and think, wait, autor defunto, defunto autor. Ah, okay, autor defunto. First, he's an author, and then he's a dead man. Defunto autor. First, he's a dead man, and then he is an author, right, or a writer. Well, and then that's why Brás Cubas explains for whom the tomb was another cradle. Um, the tomb is interesting because in Portuguese is campa. You know, it's not such a common word in Portuguese. What is cradle for, if you don't know? Um, Again, I put a note there, a small bed for an infant, often designed to rock, meaning like to, rocking back and forth so the kid may, fall asleep. Figuratively, the place or period in which something begins or is nurtured. Example, Greece was the cradle of European civilization. Of course, this is not the meaning we want here, right? So the tomb was another cradle because now he was born to another life, right? You die to this life, and you are born to the another life. So this is the first reason. The second is that this would make the writing wittier and more novel. So, people who think I am smart, I'm witty, uh, if I write this way, and there will be this sense of novelty. So I'm going to, spice things up a little. Moses, who also recounted his own death, did not put it at the commencement, but at the finish. A radical difference between this book and the Pentateuch. First of all, let's go by parts. First, let me read the definition for the Pentateuch to you. So, the Pentateuch is the first five books of the Hebrew Bible. So, we are talking about Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So they are traditionally attributed to Moses. So Moses wrote all of them. Well, they are foundational texts for Judaism and Christianity. Example, the Pentateuch is the foundation upon which the rest of the scriptures stand. Okay, the rest of the scriptures stand. Some people would also say the Torah, all right? Even though they are practically the same, the Pentateuch and the Torah, so the five first books of the Bible, there's a small difference. Look, the Pentateuch is the Greek term for the first five books of the Bible, as we have said, as a literary unit. Now, the Torah is the Hebrew term meaning instruction or law, which in Judaism refers to these same five books, right? But can also encompass the entire body of Jewish teaching, including the oral Torah. All right. So it's, I would say, like more Jewish like, culturally speaking, right? Um, now, he says, and then of course there's a big problem because we have the description of the death of Moses in the Pentateuch. So the thing is, if he wrote the book, how is it possible that he described his own death? There are some theories. One of the theories is Joshua, that was his follower, and the next one guiding the Hebrew people, finished the book, right? Or maybe somebody else. Another one, or another possibility, is that, well, of course, it was not written by him, right? But another possibility is that he got a revelation and he was able to see his own death. And then imagine that, right? So you write about the way you die, and then you actually go there and die that way. It's at least interesting to think about this possibility. But going back to Brás Cubas here, it's important for us to see the irony here, right? Moses, who also recounted his own death, did not put it in at the commencement, but at the finish. And I'm not going to do that, right? So this is a radical difference between this book and the Pentateuch. So as if this is the most important difference between this book and the Pentateuch, right? So of course they have nothing to do with one another. So that's the little irony there. I don't know if you have been following the project, but remember that our purpose is to record the whole memoirs of Brás Cubas, and it will take at least 200 250 videos. So it's a kind of work that demands a lot from me, so I need your help. So please subscribe to the channel, tell people about this project, right? Invite people to follow this project as well. If you feel like it, you can also contribute. I left my Pix number in the description of the video.